Well, good morning. I want to welcome everyone here. My name is Denise Donahue. I'm director of the County Road Association of Michigan, and I am representing, our members represent the 83 county road commissions and road departments around the state of Michigan that are responsible for 75% of the road miles. So today we have a significant group gathered here to talk about Michigan's commitments to roads, bridges, and right-of-way, as well as water lines, sewer lines, dams, and other long neglected infrastructure in the state of Michigan. Specifically, this combined set of speakers representing the public and private sectors and business interests is calling on the Michigan Legislature to step up its focus and support of infrastructure in the current and future budgeting process. We need a path forward. Thinking back to November 2015, Governor Snyder, Senate Majority Leader Meekhoff, and other legislative leaders said this road funding package was a good first step on roads and bridges, a down payment, if you will. Today, we're reminding the legislature that they must follow through with the full first step by allocating $600 million in general fund, beginning with the 2019 budget being drawn up next spring. And we're calling for the first step on the rest of Michigan's aged underground infrastructure. Headlines on sinkholes, water quality systems that are not pure. That's not the Michigan that any of us want to see splashed around radio, TV, and the internet. So today, on the first day of the Mackinac Public Policy Conference, the biggest policy conference of the year, we are pledging our support to be good stewards of new infrastructure funds, renewing our call for general fund dollars for roads, bridges, and asking the legislature to identify a path forward for funding water, stormwater, and sewer systems. At this point, our first speaker is Joanna Johnson, Chair of the Transportation Asset Management Council, and also Managing Director of the Kalamazoo County Road Commission.
Good morning, and thank you, Denise. First of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our transportation partners for all they do in public service daily. I'll start the news conference by summarizing the condition of Michigan's roads and bridges in context of the investments Michigan is making now and is supposed to be making starting in a couple of years to fix and maintain these vital assets. I will be touching on just roads and bridges, while some of our other speakers following me will provide details about Michigan's other infrastructure needs related to community water systems, dams, and stormwater and wastewater sewer systems. On May 2nd, the Transportation Asset Management Council released its 2016 annual report. During 2016, the Asset Management Council rated the pavement condition of the paved federal aid eligible roads for the 12th consecutive year. This data collection included 57,961 lane miles of paved roads in Michigan, state freeways and highways, city major streets, and county primary roads. This effort was achieved through a cooperative effort of individuals from county road agencies, city and village teams, the Michigan Department of Transportation, regional planning agencies, and metropolitan planning organizations. In addition, the Asset Management Council collected pavement conditions on some of Michigan's paved non-federal aid eligible roads. In terms of physical condition, the report reveals further deterioration of Michigan's federal aid eligible roads from the previous year, with more miles being rated as poor. The 2016 condition data includes 18% of these roads are in good condition, 43% are in fair condition, and 39% are in poor condition. Contrary to 2015, the breakdown was 17% good, 45% fair, and 38% poor. The report also includes data on the condition of all public bridges in Michigan. An analysis of the bridge condition data indicates that state and local bridge owners are holding their own, despite rising costs and revenue challenges. This year's report reveals Michigan has 11.1% of their bridges as structurally deficient. By the way of comparison with other Midwest states, Michigan has a significantly higher percentage of structurally deficient bridges than other Great Lakes states, with Wisconsin having 8.7%, Indiana 8%, Illinois 8.4%, and Ohio 6.9%. Given the current conditions of Michigan roads and bridges, The current influxes of new funds are still not sufficient to improve Michigan's road and bridge system. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. At this point, I introduce Ron Branke. Ron is Executive Director of the American Society of Civil Engineers, Michigan Section, and the American Council of Engineering Companies of Michigan, and he was also a member of the Governor's 21st Century Infrastructure Commission. Ron?
Thank you, Denise. So as the stewards of the state's infrastructure, engineers hold a responsibility to inform Michiganders about the condition of our infrastructure in the name of public health and safety. The infrastructure report card is the method used by ASCE. Using the familiar A to F school report card format, ASCE most recently graded Michigan as an overall grade of a D. While the assessment is 8 years old, not much has changed. Later this year, ASCE will release a new report card to provide an updated assessment of our roads, bridges, drinking water, dams, and other infrastructure. But we see the symptoms of low infrastructure grades regularly in the news headlines today. Untreated sewage flowing into our lakes and streams, concrete from bridges and pavement going through windshields in Detroit, and sinkholes in Fraser and other cities. Clearly, we are not giving our infrastructure the attention, the thoughtful policy leadership, or the investment it deserves. Infrastructure is the backbone of our state economy. After all, we are the home city that put America on four wheels. Yet we have allowed our infrastructure to fall into disrepair. This is a drag on the state's economy and on our bank accounts. For example, driving Michigan's poor roads cost drivers an average of $540 a year. As state legislators gather at Mackinac Island, infrastructure needs to be a top priority, not to just define the problem. We know the problem. We live it every day. But to find solutions and a path going forward. Engineers believe that lawmakers need to focus on three key elements: investment, leadership and planning, and preparation for the needs of the future. Investment should be no surprise. The 21st Century Infrastructure Commission recognized this in its report last year, that it will take an additional $4 billion a year to improve our state's infrastructure. Yet our legislators recently cut funding proposed by Governor Snyder for a Michigan Infrastructure Fund. And we need smart investments, which will only be possible with leadership, planning, and a clear vision for the future. The Commission report also provided that framework to ensure investments are spent wisely. We must embrace asset management and prioritize and coordinate projects with critical benefits to the economy, the public safety, and the quality of life. Finally, we must continue to embrace innovation, new technologies and new materials to be efficient and to ensure our infrastructure is resilient and sustainable. Autonomous vehicles, for example, is one opportunity to transform how we design and use our infrastructure now and into the future. But the facts speak for themselves. The report card is in, and Michigan gets a D. This cannot be ignored, and our grade is not getting better. Michigan's state motto is, if you seek a pleasant peninsula, look about you. I ask our lawmakers and leadership, do you like what you see? It's time to act. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. And now I'll give a few comments on behalf of Michigan's county road agencies. They're all appreciative, there's no question, all county road agencies are appreciative of new funding coming for roads, bridges, and the right-of-way. And we're hoping Michigan has finally turned the corner toward good roads. But there are significant reasons for concerns. So far, our county road agencies have received 3 payments of the new funds. So for all those folks calling your local road commission wondering when their road will be fixed, it's going to be a while. As it relates to being good stewards of roads, bridges, and right-of-way money, at least 85% of county road agencies have an asset management plan. They're using an asset management strategy. A similar percentage have at least a 3-year plan for using the new funds coming from increased gas tax and registration fees. Our agencies have developed those plans by working with townships, who are our partners and must contribute financially to many of our road projects. Counties, we work with local communities and local business interests. Also, since November of 2015, all 83 county road agencies and 533 cities and villages have agreed upon a local pavement warranty program, which was called for by the 2015 transportation package. That warranty is now under review at MDOT. So in short, county road agencies are holding up our end of the 2015 transportation package. Yet there's no question that road agencies are worried. Michigan residents believe their roads will be fixed tomorrow. But even by 2021, we'll have only half the dollars we need. And for the first time, half of the new dollars depend on new legislators to vote for them every single year, even while the faces change in the legislature, even while the face of the governor's office will change. Our members wonder what will be the next Flint, what will be the next sinkhole that triggers legislators to pull general funds away from roads. These are symptoms of a neglected infrastructure, and the legislature needs to develop an immediate plan to fix the infrastructure, not just clean up the systems. County road commissions and departments stand with our peers here today and urge this legislature to come through with the full GF plan for the roads in 2019, 2020, 2021, and beyond. The chart on your left here, the sideways Y, just shows what happens with the road ratings with and without the promise of general fund. So we start at 53% good and fair roads. That percentage is dropping. Kind of the axis of the Y is the decision point. In 2019, the promise of general fund. If the general fund comes through, we take the blue path and roads will slowly begin to get better. And you can see where it goes without it. It's also important to point out the undisputed financial need for returning Michigan roads, bridges, and right-of-way to a sustainable condition. It dwarfs the projected funding. The legislature took the first step in 2015. This stack of reports here, you can read them at your leisure, are all indicate an unmet annual need for an additional $2.2 to $2.5 billion. $1.2 billion of that is promised, so we're short. And we're beginning to hear voices across the street say it'll be a tough lift to find the general funds needed to restore the roads, harder than anybody thought. A comprehensive, adequately funded plan to restore Michigan's infrastructure will be hard, but the legislature needs to take it on. I just will quickly mention, we completed a survey at the County Road Association of all of our road members last week. The pie chart on your far right aggregates the portion of local road miles that county road agencies will work on in the year 2020. So by 2020, almost all of the new funding is in, and you can see a very small percentage of roads will be worked on. The green slice represents preservation work, so that's pothole patching, fixing cracks, maintaining the infrastructure that we have. The gold slice of pie indicates resurfacing of roads, and the very small red slice is roads that will be reconstructed, taken right down to the soil, and rebuilt. So while we are appreciative of the legislature's bold fund to generate new roads, noticeable improvements are many years away. We are also calling upon the 2017-2018 legislature to keep this promise and find an immediate path forward for the second step of road funds and a comprehensive plan for funding all of Michigan's infrastructure. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dan Gilmartin, CEO and Executive Director of the Michigan Municipal League. Dan?
Thank you all, and welcome to the Municipal League offices. I'm Dan Gilmartin, as Denise said, the Executive Director and CEO of the Michigan Municipal League. And I'm going to talk about what I call today the 3 E's. And I'll say I call it that because I just thought of it. I thought, wow, that makes sense. But it's really about everything. It's about efficiencies, and it's about economics. And, you know, we represent cities and villages across the state and urban townships as well. And we hear all the time from folks, whether it's a road, a bridge, a sidewalk, public transportation, infrastructure like water and sewer, even public buildings, if you're talking about city halls and police departments and senior citizen centers and libraries, all the things that make up the fabric of a community, they're all in trouble. We do not have the revenues in this state to deal with some of those issues. And as speakers before me have talked about, those are the things we got to deal with if we're going to make Michigan truly what it should be, a great peninsula to look about, an economic powerhouse, an innovative place that develops the next slew of vehicles like autonomous vehicles and those types of things. We've got to have great infrastructure to be able to do those things. So it's really everything when we talk about the problems here in our state, and some of the studies that have come out. Denise talked about the fact that only 19% of roads in Michigan are in good shape. Those are things that we have studied. My guess is if we looked that deeply at all the things that I just mentioned, you'd see similar numbers across the board for some of those programs as well, because where you see a 40 or a 50-year-old road that has not been improved, or a bridge that's not been rebuilt in decades, chances are you're seeing water and sewer lines look the same way in public infrastructure across the board. So it's really about everything here and the fact that we are falling behind on everything. Second thing is about efficiencies. There are a number of folks up here who are leaders in the asset management world, leaders in the private sector who deal with some of the infrastructure problems, leaders in the public sector who deal with the infrastructure issues. And I can tell you, from an efficiency standpoint, we've never been better here in this state. You can always do better, you can always be more efficient. But how locals work with private contractors, how we're utilizing funds better, how we're all working together, like at the Asset Management Council and through associations throughout the state, we're doing a much better job with those funds than we've ever done before, and trying to figure out what places we need to engage with. So I know in the past there's been talk about we can't move on some of the funding issues until we become more efficient. And I can say just during my short time here at the league, short being 20 years, that's short, right? I can say that we have really increased the capacity of all of us up here to work together, and through some of these fights that we've been involved in the legislature, we've made it a progress and made it a real point to do those types of things. And the last thing I want to talk about is economics. Having great infrastructure is an economic argument, plain and simple. If we want Michigan to be an economic powerhouse, we've got to have great places where people want to live, where they want to raise families, where businesses want to come to, where entrepreneurs feel welcome, where innovation happens. That's about infrastructure in this state. That's about creating the types of life experiences that draw people to our state. If we don't do that, we don't have a chance in the new economy where people can choose to live anywhere. So you talk about the underbelly of what we do here, the roads, the sewers, the transit, everything else that we're talking about here today. We've got to do a better job as a collective community, and the state legislature has to get on board with providing the types of revenues we all need and they need to make Michigan that kind of a place. If we don't do that, we're going to be swimming uphill the whole way. So with that, I will step aside and thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Dan. At this point, I would introduce Andy Johnston. Andy is the Vice President of Government and Corporate Affairs at the Grand Rapids Area Chamber of Commerce. Andy?
Thank you, Denise, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. As was talked about, sound infrastructure is vital for economic growth. The drivers of our economy, our manufacturing sector, our ag sector, and our tourism sector all depend on it. And without sound infrastructure, they're going to suffer. Talent and attraction and retention suffer without sound infrastructure, and our ability to compete overall diminishes. That's why the business community has made infrastructure a top priority. Michigan should strive to be a top 10 state when it comes to transportation infrastructure. High quality roads and bridges, and also infrastructure, I'd say with a capital I, our sewers and water systems are not nice to have for businesses, they're a need to have. And investment will further business growth. Infrastructure must be a data-driven discussion. Facts are friendly, and we may not always like what they have to say, but we shouldn't ignore them. And the reports are clear. Report after report show the same thing. And to suggest that the infrastructure challenges that Michigan faces are significant would be an understatement. Fixing existing systems and investing in new capacity is key to sustaining and growing the economic ecosystem that supports who we are as a state. We've talked about autonomous vehicles. We want to win this race to be the place where mobility thrives into the future here in Michigan. But we're not the only state facing these issues. For our competitiveness, Michigan must take the long view and protect our foundation if we want to continue to attract investment. We were excited in West Michigan that we were recently selected as a regional infrastructure pilot. This collaborative effort is key to improving our statewide infrastructure and will help make Michigan a national leader in asset management and planning. Coordinating councils and asset management and other tools are best practices that will make our infrastructure dollar go farther. Where the governor signed that executive directive was at Continental Dairy in Coopersville. This place is growing leaps and bounds. They get milk from 38 counties across the state. If you don't think sound infrastructure is key to their operation, you have to be kidding yourself. It's those kind of growing operations that we want to continue to support investment in Michigan. But to make this work, as has been talked about, the legislature needs to keep their commitment to infrastructure. The commitment they made in 2015 for roads, and they need to begin to lay the foundation to address other vital systems. We need to stress that these funds are not guaranteed, and the legislature must make this commitment a top priority. Denise mentioned that some across the street are saying, wow, $4 billion, that's a big lift. That number is not getting any smaller the longer we wait. We need to start taking bites of this elephant out. So now is the time for policymakers to be having this discussion. We know it's going to be one at the island, and we hope they walk away from that island with solutions to make investment in these core government services. Thank you so much, and I'll turn it back over to Denise.
Thanks, Andy. At this point, I want to introduce Mike Nystrom. He's our last speaker. He is Executive Vice President of the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association, or MITA. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Denise. So I get to close this out today. Appreciate you all being here. I represent all the contractors who are attempting to rebuild Michigan's infrastructure. And I say attempting because it's been a huge lift for my members, Ron's members. It's quite a challenge out there to try to put Band-Aids on when we actually need full surgery in many areas. We've talked about, many of our speakers have talked about the roads. They've been part of, I think all of us have been part of the road debate for the last 10 years. And literally that debate was a long slog of 10 years. We've just started talking about the broader discussion, and we have Flint and Fraser, which are literally making national news during the Super Bowl, and Flint was on for quite a while. I think Candace Miller said it best when she said that the Fraser sinkhole is literally the canary in a tunnel. We don't know what's going on out there, and the challenge with that is the asset management has been talked about. We haven't been doing it on our underground infrastructure. We lead the nation in terms of asset management on the road side. We've got to engage on our underground infrastructure as well. That's part of the challenge with the public. The public doesn't understand what they don't see. Until a sewer backs up in my basement, I'm not concerned about the fact that my toilet and my washing machine they're going out of my house fine. Everything's good as far as I'm concerned. And the fact is that canary in the tunnel is looming somewhere across the state. We're going to have other problems somewhere across the state. We've seen other sinkholes in the UP and other townships across the state. Fraser just happened to get all of the big news. We have a Pure Michigan campaign, and yet an average since 2008 of 5.7 billion gallons of raw sewage flows into Michigan waterways. Currently, as has been mentioned, we have 39% of our roads in poor condition. Even with the new road funding package coming forward, we will see that number continue to drop on state highways. The bottom line is that 25% of beaches in 2015 were closed. That's approximately 100 beaches were closed due to some form of contamination. And yet we have this wonderful campaign saying, y'all come now, and yet you're going to come into a state with bad roads, waterways that are contaminated. It's somewhat counterintuitive. It doesn't make sense in many ways that the legislature doesn't see this as a priority. Because of these high-profile issues in Fraser and Flint, 2 recent surveys have pointed out that infrastructure is the top issue of concern for the voters and the state's business community, as has been mentioned. And yet it seems the legislature has yet to realize this. The legislature seems to be focused on other priorities, which is contrary to the interests of the general public. Governor Snyder has recognized these citizen concerns and included $20 million in his budget proposal, which he had hoped was going to rise to approximately $100 million during budget discussions. However, at some point, it seems that the legislature has completely set aside this priority to the back burner and thus has reduced it to $0 in the Michigan Infrastructure Fund. Not only is this a concern because of the need to have a broader focus on infrastructure, but state money is needed to support local funding in order to fix many of these problems. However, in the end, it also gives us pause, as has been mentioned by Denise, that the concern is not there for the legislature. They are not serious about infrastructure in any way, but also when you consider the tenuous nature of the 2015 road package, how are folks who can't find 20 million for infrastructure going to find 600 million for roads over the next couple years? Our state elected officials need to refocus and make infrastructure a top priority. And with that, we'd be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Mike,
Yes.
why are you guys not in the people's faces in Mackinac this spring moment?
We're heading up there. Many of us are heading up there right now. Folks are already on the road heading up there. We have staff that's headed up there, so it is going to be a priority. I think our focus is we not only want to have the conversation up there, it has to be an ongoing conversation. It starts this weekend. It starts now with this press conference. Going forward, it has to be an ongoing, as you said, in-your-face campaign.
And I do have a question about
Yes.
Yeah. And I do have a question about a specific project, the Hamilton Dam in Flint. Flint is starting a riverfront restoration project this summer. They'll be dredging the river, and the dam could be removed by fall. I am told anecdotally that it's one of, if not the most dangerous dam in the state of Michigan. Do we know much about this project to remove that particular dam?
I don't apologize. I know that dams in the 21st Century Infrastructure Commission report, dams were a big priority. There are recommendations in there. I can't speak specifically to the one.
Is it fair to say that all of your confidence level in the legislature appropriating general funds has gone down since they passed the road funding package?
So repeat it.
Yeah, repeat it for the
Has the confidence gone down in the legislature? Yes.
What did they do to lower your confidence level in a general fund commitment to infrastructure?
I'm going to take only a little piece of that in terms of the general fund. This is the first time. Oh, I'm so sorry. We can't get the protocol. The protocol is, the question that you asked was, what has changed the confidence level that the legislature will come through with the needed general funds for roads, bridges, right-of-way, and infrastructure? I'm just going to speak a little bit to the roads piece, and that is, we as county road agencies have been concerned from the get-go in terms of this is the first time that funds dedicated to roads are coming out of the state general fund. Now, there were some projects over the last couple of years, but now with the $1.2 billion that we are talking about, half of that is dependent on the legislature to approve it in the budget every single year. Year after year, people have to vote for it who maybe didn't understand it or weren't around even when it was passed in the first place. So I think that has been a concern for all of our members from the get-go. Then when you see other significant demands on general fund, like Flint, like sinkholes, like who knows what else is around the corner. And so we're looking for a more comprehensive solution. That's just my piece.
I will follow the lead of my colleague from MITA, and that is he gave a one-word answer to the reason why are we losing faith in the legislature, with the answer of yes. I'll say the question was, what have they done? What has the legislature done to improve this? And the answer is nothing.
Anyone else? They'd be happy to stick around for one-on-ones if you want to. I'm sorry.
Is calling for lawmakers to keep their commitment to the general fund going to be enough?
I think that, as I mentioned in the earlier question, it begins today. We need to have them thinking about it a year in advance of their budget discussions, where they're going to have to come up with hundreds of millions of dollars, not just $20 million. We have issues that are making national news. Folks in the Fraser area can't flush their toilets all at the same time during the Super Bowl, and yet they're making fun of it on every late night television show. And yet our legislature literally sticks their head in the sand, hopefully at one of those contaminated beaches, so that they understand the real issue here, that there are problems going on out there, and ultimately, they can't even come up with $20 million. How do we have any faith? We're all up here because we have zero faith that they are going to recognize this as a priority and be able to put other priorities aside and address this one. We are getting worse each year, as you heard in the asset management report. You can read any one of these reports. These aren't my reports. None of these are their reports. These are independent reports that every one of them say the same thing. We're getting worse, and yet they zero out the Michigan Infrastructure Fund.
Sorry, one more question on that. Following up what you said, something Mr. Johnson said earlier about talking about the $4 billion number and how that can be a little intimidating for lawmakers. And you made the comment in terms of you need to start, taking bites out of this. Do I take that to mean you guys would support maybe not doing $4 billion a year, but doing incremental funding packages like we saw in 2015? Is that an appropriate solution?
I think the $4 billion is a big number. We have to start some. Oh yes, repeat the question.
We got a bunch of people on
Is $4 billion too much? Is it enough? I don't know what your question was. I don't do this every day. I'm good at answering questions, not asking them.
You guys need to start selling this not as a $4 billion a year thing, but in incremental taking the bites.
Are we okay with incremental taking bites? Absolutely. That's why we supported the $20 billion. Even the House version at $20 million. Even the House version at $5 million is a first step. That's what's important, Andy.
Yeah, and we
Repeat
need
the question.
Frankly, we need to keep the drumbeat going. Your earlier question about starting the budget discussion now for 2019, these reports up here, it took us 10 years just to get to the 2015 road plan, and we need to make sure that goes forward. Now, in terms of the $20 million in the infrastructure fund, that's about infrastructure with a capital I. If we really want to be competitive, we need to have water, sewer, and broadband as well extended throughout the state. Particularly in West Michigan, we have a lot of rural areas where if you're not connected to the internet, you're not connected to the economy now. And so that infrastructure fund was working to try and set up systems across jurisdictions to identify how we can move Michigan forward in a lot of different system components. From a business community perspective, we're dealing with systems here that are 50 and 100 years old. It's time to update them. We need to start the drumbeat. It is a big number, there's no doubt about it. But as I was trying to say in my comments, that's how you eat an elephant, one bite at a time. And we were excited to see that there was at least seed money in the infrastructure fund initially in terms of the budget process. Now that it's zeroed out, that's a big red flag and a big concern that this isn't going to be a priority going forward.
I just want to acknowledge, we also have up front with us Steve Curry, Executive Director of the Michigan Association of Counties. Thanks, Steve. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll conclude, and the rest of us will be around.